This is Motivation. I'm Laurie Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Krissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
All right, so for today's episode, it's all about accelerating your life. Momentum is a huge factor in every facet of life, and momentum is motion. When you ride a motorcycle and build a forward momentum, your speed quickly can pick up and propel you forward in the direction you wish to go. And once your momentum gets going, it requires more and more brakes to power that stop. So our lives are the same. We have the ability to build a forward momentum within our lives. So in today's podcast, that's what we're talking about. How to further that momentum and what it can mean in our lives. How to accelerate our lives forward in a direction we wish to go.
And we'll share your motivation maintenance so that you can invite a tangible change in your life today to help propel you forward toward your goals. This is Motovation. Momentum. This is a key ingredient in our lives, even if we don't think about it. So, Laurie, to start things off, I'm going to paint a picture of the backwards momentum that could be in our lives. You think of those days where you sit on the couch, all of a sudden you've watched a show, and then before you know it, the entire day has passed you by and you've done nothing and you literally feel like a pile of goo. That's not really going to be something that propels you forward, but that level of just chilling out and not doing something that's going to put you in the direction of what you want to go in your day, that's a bit of a contagious feeling. And before you know it, days turn to weeks, turn to months, turn to years, and you all of a sudden look back and think, hey, how did we get here? And I haven't done anything I meant to do this year. It's the same every single year. Statistically, New Year's resolutions are a big thing on our agenda, yet we fail to create a plan to propel ourselves forward, to build momentum toward those goals. In fact, I believe by the month of February, about 95% of New Year's resolutions have fallen to the wayside. So momentum, it's very powerful when you think about it, is the strength or force gained by a series of actions. We have the ability to create that forward motion and force within our lives. And the steps don't always have to be as big as we imagine them to be.
Krissy, you pretty much just described most of my 20s for real. Like I didn't really take that like pile of goo where you just wake up and you're like, oh, I'll maybe do something cool today. Especially on weekends, like, oh, I might do something. Well, that's something usually involved like home scents and winters and then like back to the goo on the couch. But I would do things, if someone called up and was like, hey, you want to, go do, I don't know, anything that sounded like a good time in that moment. Yeah, sure. Kind of thing. But I really didn't grasp everything that you do in a day creates a momentum in a certain direction. And the things that I wanted to accomplish in life or the goals that I wanted to hit, I would really get going at the beginning, but as soon as it got a little hard, I was like, nope, off to another goal that'll make me feel good. And, the momentary thing. And it wasn't until this past few years where I actually started to understand the philosophy behind momentum of like, you have to start very small. You have to just start, number one. But also
that's a tough step, though.
That's sometimes
there's a lot of talking before that.
But that like it is meant to get a little tricky and hard. But that momentum of understanding that and keep continuing and building that momentum is what will carry you through. And also, when you kind of grasp that it is so much about the momentum and working with what's already working rather than looking at what needs to be fixed or where you're lacking or your weaknesses. And then why am I not hacking into all the things that are working for me? Why aren't I hacking into my strengths? Because that's already momentum in itself. And so it wasn't until just as lately that it's like, if you want to achieve these goals, you have to really build up a momentum and habitual behavior, all the above, but like you can work with yourself rather than against yourself. And it's crazy to think that like it took till like 30s to really grasp that. and then put in the work, not just understand it.
I think when people think of goal setting, and really a great way to visualize the concept of momentum itself is thinking of one of those extendable ladders. You're not just going to leap onto the top rung. You get there step by step by step by step. And all of a sudden it gets easier to climb up as you're getting there. Everything's getting closer. You can see everything in your reach and really in your grasp. Another way to visualize it is the snowball effect. All of a sudden, if you're rolling it, it starts as a pile of nothing. And then before you know it, you have this massive snowman that you've built. And it's that forward momentum that's ultimately going to get you to your goals, which I had a situation with momentum in my life quite recently that I think can help illustrate when you decide to start having that trajectory, because I think like everyone else, super guilty. I'm a dreamer. So all of a sudden I'll have a million ideas and things that I want to strive for. And it's wonderful to talk about. But if you're not doing anything in your day to day or hour by hour to carve out that space to get there, it's never going to happen. So creatively, I wanted to add another venture in my sphere. And for ages, I talked about, hey, I live in Vancouver. Film is here. TV is here. It's totally in my wheelhouse. I should really get an agent one day and make this happen. Did nothing about it. Lived out here for 5 years. When the new year rolled around, I said, enough. This actually is going to be one of my goals that I'll bring to fruition. And all of a sudden, people and things started coming into my life. I mean, law of attraction is a completely other beast to tackle, but I put out a couple feelers to colleagues that I'd had in regards to headshots. All of a sudden that led me to this photographer that doesn't really do them as much as anymore, but because that friend then called in a favor, I had that lined up, got the headshots done. From him, he had an agent that was taking on people that would be really interested in my wheelhouse, connected with her. And by the end of the week, I had my first audition. Now, to this point, nothing's happened with it yet, but because nothing's happened and there's that lull that could be perceived as an obstacle, is that a reason to stop? Hell no, we're just getting started. This would be the moment, though, that a lot of people would think, well, gave it a shot. I tried. I've done 8 attempts and it didn't work out. No. I mean, sometimes you're working toward the wrong thing and the universe makes it really clear you're on the right path, or the wrong path, rather. But when you know that it's right in your gut, just keep cracking at it and make little steps each day. Maybe it's a course that I do. Maybe it's another conversation, getting a mentor, and you can invite all of that in your life. But the minute you stop, well, of course, it's not going to happen. You have literally halted your momentum. Next step is goo pile.
And we do. That's where I talked about way back when I would give it a good go and I do it while it was exciting and fresh. But as soon as it got uncomfortable or difficult is when I would, pull the ripcord. And then I could say I did it. And I could say I gave it a shot, and on, paper, it looked like it, but like really and truly, I didn't continue with the momentum. As soon as there was any kind of a lull, I looked at that as like, wasn't meant to be. Wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
It's
a sign.
Yeah, it's a sign. But a lot of times when you think about the excitement of it, that's momentum in itself, right? So of course it's going to propel forward. It's like anything. It's like if you start to exercise and at the beginning you're so into it, and then that little bit of a lull happened, you're like, oh, this feels like the hardest thing in the world, right? Getting kind of past that. But there is that component to, if you're actually working. So this is just, I guess, a little bit of a different side of momentum. Of like an example would be I ride the stationary bike some mornings, and when my legs are really burning and I remind myself that I'm like, okay, just make it 1 more minute, just wake this 1 more minute. And I remind myself that it's triggering within me my own momentum, because I look at it as like, not only is it just pushing and keeping with the momentum of where I'm at on this bike, but this moment I'm going to use as momentum in a different area of my life when things get a little difficult in my job, in a relationship, and I just want to give up. And then I remembered when my legs were burning and I pushed through in 1 more minute and I got to the other side, that there was more in me than I thought. So I hijack a lot of times my momentum from other habitual behaviors in my life, what's working in my life, where I'm at already. And then I plug that momentum into places where I am not as well versed, or the momentum's not quite the same, or where it's at. And it works so well, because all of a sudden I'll be like, I just want to quit. And then I'll be like, think of the bike, give it 10 more minutes, give it 1 more hour. And holy shit, because the progress compounds that momentum of all these little pockets of life, that if you just kind of stick with it and you keep going and you just keep that momentum going, sort of thing. Even on the days that you've even talked about the goo moments, when I used to have a day like that, I would be like, oh no, because I'd be like, I'm back to my old self and this is what I used to do. And I'd panic thinking that I was going to go back to this like slippery slope of like, all I want to do is lay on the sofa and watch TV and eat. But because my momentum is so fierce, when we talked about the motorcycle, once your momentum's going and it's harder to put those brakes on, right? You got to put more force on the brakes. If I have a day of goo, I've now learned that like, no big deal. Really no big deal, because my momentum now of being productive in a day is so, the force of it is so much there that I can have a day where I'm just of useless, and I say useless in the meaning of just like the only productivity I have is just the fact that I've laid there and done nothing. And the next day I feel like $1,000,000 and I am hitting it harder than I was the day prior to goo day. Sort of thing, because the brakes are only just a little bit of a pump, a little bit of a slowdown. But like I would have to actively sabotage myself right now to put full brakes on the momentum that I've got in my life. But I had to work up to this kind of rhythm and this momentum and all, but just that every day you put in, it compounds. So it's really fucking cool to understand it and then actually put it into place and then have it become part of your life.
Yes. And Laurie, the thing that I love the most about it, how you're saying it being this compound, is that what an opportunity we have in our lives. Sometimes we find ourselves thinking, oh, I really wish I could change this. I really wish I could try that. Well, that's the beauty when you realize the power of momentum. That first stride doesn't have to be nearly as big as you think that it is, which makes our goals so accessible. For myself personally, I got really into fitness, and it's the same thing where I still remember I wanted to start lifting weights a lot heavier. Things had gotten really out of control. I was visiting happy hours all the time. And my first step in the gym, I decided to go balls to the wall. Not recommended at all. It was an epic fail. I was doing hip thrusts and I literally got stuck under the barbell, and another gym patron had to get it off of me.
Amazing.
There was a lot of bruises in the crotch area.
Anybody.
What's funny is I didn't even have to say anything because they could just see the train wreck crumple in. So going balls to the wall out of the gate, not a great idea. But after that humbling experience, I was like, okay, maybe small steps. And the amazing thing is when you look down the line several months later, that thing that crushed me out of the gate was easy and I could do 20 times. That whole experience became laughable from the beginning. It was such a teachable moment, thinking, hey, I can't leap from here to here, and that's okay. But I can map out a plan, build the strides forward, implement consistency, because so much of what we want is generally more about consistency and persistence, putting those in tandem. And if you put that into action every single day, oh my gosh. And it could be about any facet of your life, and you literally have the ability to make change. The reason why, and I know this isn't a fitness podcast, but why I love it so much is because I have seen what happens when you put 12 weeks of dedication into something, especially times that I've done competitions. In 12 weeks, you can make such incredible changes in yourself. And yes, I get it. It is a bit of a vain process because so much is about the physicality. But what that represents to me is, hey, if I put this hard work in and consistency every day, that is a recipe. And as you can imagine, Laurie, with talking of momentum, the more I'm into it, the beginning is hard to make that change. But the more you're moving along those 12 weeks, all of a sudden by the end, you're coasting through. You're coasting.
I think that's why people, when they fall in love with anything, that they're doing as a hobby, and then that's all they want to talk about. And they just want to preach it to the world. And everyone's like, oh, I have to hear about that one more time. Like, and I think when you tap into something that you go, holy shit, this is like a magic little key. And I think what at the end of the day is when you tap into purpose and you tap into your why around something, and then you become consistent with it. And then you see the momentum, which creates a magic around you. And all of a sudden you really tap into this vortex and what you talked about, that high vibration, kind of thing. And it's not hippy dippy things we talk about vibration. It's down to physics at this point. And I don't think we know how to verbalize it. And when you really break it down, it's so much of it is about momentum. And the only way that we're going to become the people we want to become, the goals we want to achieve, all those different things, is like the most incremental step, one step at a time. And the consistency, when you said, Krissy, is so important, because you're like, you can't get momentum without consistency. Think of being on a swing as a little kid, and you're pumping your legs to get the momentum to go higher and higher and higher. And if you stop pumping your legs, for a couple of seconds, you're still going to stay high in the air, right? And you can pump again and get yourself right back very quickly. But if you stop pumping altogether, you'll eventually just slowly come down to that stop. And so it's one of those things, like you get the slouchy day. That's you stop pumping your legs for a little bit up, but like you're still up there. Don't you worry. It's not all for naught.
Well, and I think sometimes we get caught up in our own narrative. I have such a good example of this, although some of you might feel it's a bit silly. But first of all, motion drives action. With inaction, there's going to be no motion forward. So in my career, having a social media presence is an important part of the job. At this point now, when I apply for any new positions, they actually have you include your follower count. So what I'm about to say doesn't come out of an area of narcissism. A lot of it is necessity to stay relevant in a changing industry. TikTok, of course, came around last year, blew up from kids dancing to everyone stuck in a pandemic board at home. And I'm so impressed by the creativity that is out there.
Oh, it's crazy.
As time's gone on. Oh, I love it. I literally am so impressed by people and their humor and their ingenuity. It's amazing. But as I was consuming all this content, I was seeing other people in my field, and I work in broadcasting on air, doing all these creative things, showing the behind the scenes and getting a lot of engagement out of that. Yet I was sitting on the sidelines for some reason thinking, yeah, that's not for me. Or, well, like I wouldn't do that. Why would I do that? And then all of a sudden I had this inkling. And you know what was stopping me? By the time I came full circle to that was a year later, after everything really blew up on the app. And I felt so far removed, like it was so impossible and unattainable to retain any type of audience or build a platform. I wasn't going to pursue it. And then I thought, no, I just need to start. I just need to start creating. So I made it a little project for myself to put a new video up every day, no matter what it is, try and get a little creative, try something new and have fun. And all of a sudden the engagement and the platform has started to grow for me in a small way. And so again, at this juncture, I could have that moment of thinking, oh, I'm not seeing as much engagement. That one didn't do as well. And then that's the obstacle moment. But no, I bet you any money, mark my words, if I keep going in this direction, the growth will happen. And it's such a silly goal, but I really share that to just show how minute or finite your goal could be. But ultimately, everyday action is going to take you there.
It absolutely will take you somewhere by doing it every day, if not in TikTok land, but it's going to hone in on your skill set, and you could apply that somewhere different, who knows, down the road, where all of that pays off in a completely different context that you didn't anticipate, but that work will never be for naught, sort of thing, right? There is this, I can't remember the book that it was in. Atomic Habits is an amazing book. And I think it was maybe in this book. Anyways, they were talking about an experience, and it was talking about consistency, which goes back to momentum, sort of thing. And why it's so important is that it was this art photography class, and they gave half the class. They said you have to take one picture every day for, I think it was 100 days. And then the other, and that's going to be your final mark, is like that it doesn't matter what you take a picture of, but that you take 100 pictures. And the other side of the class had to take, their mark was one photo, the best photo. They just have to bring in the best photo that they did that year. And when they all brought in their photos, the group that did the 100 photos, more or less, their actual end results blew the one photo out of the water. And they talk about it. It was because the other ones were just practicing and they were just consistent. And then their eye became more trained, and where the other group was so hyper focused on waiting around for the perfect photo, or just wait, or coming from a place of perfectionism.
Yes.
That this group ended up becoming substantially better photographers than the group that only were supposed to come in with their absolute best. And it goes back to the consistency of not worrying about necessarily the perfection of it, but the progression of it, which goes back to the momentum, the moving momentum, because you're learning something about it every day, because you're not having all these rules and regulations, expectations, all these things about the exact end goal. It's more, and we could relate that to another podcast that we did, but it's this like really cool understanding. So when you say like, I'm doing a video every single day, that momentum, that's going to be invaluable. And you're going to learn the consistency and the discipline that'll carry over into other areas of your life. It's going to be a part of your being, is consistency and momentum. It hits every facet of our lives. And it's so cool when you really like, I think it's the coolest darn thing. When I understood it and was like, wow, that's really amazing. I wish I knew that a long time ago.
But Laurie, you know what it is, and why I think we don't come to this light bulb moment is because it's actually so simple. And so when you pause and think and you have these big goals and they seem so impossible, it's hard to believe that the solution could really be as simple as starting. And so when we talked at the beginning of this podcast, we plan to address how to accelerate your momentum. That really is the primary ingredient, because you kind of touched on it there, Laurie. And I can think of a million times my narrative spins in the direction of, well, it's not the right time today. I'm busy, and a million other excuses where you're looking for this perfect moment to just start. But really, that's an element of procrastination, and creative procrastination is a huge thing that I combat regularly in my life. I'm so guilty of it in a million ways. Whereas the simple solution is just start. Literally.
We have this, I'll do it this time. I'll do it next time. I'll do it when I feel more motivated. I'll do it when I feel more, more like the person that would actually do that thing.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're like, it doesn't work that way. You got to do the thing to become the person that you foresee. You don't wait to become the person to do the thing. And I think that's where it gets mixed up. But what we have it so backwards, and we're taught to make it backwards, because
you're nailing it.
It's the doing the thing that creates what you envision. It's how you quite literally meet the vision that's in your mind and the goal that's been presented to you and you've been blessed with, but you can't, we've got it mixed up. We've got it just fucking mixed up.
Anytime we try something new and finally say today is the day and make it happen, there is a feeling about that and a vibe. It ignites something inside of you. And that's really like turning the ignition on the momentum. And then your work every day is what generates the gas pedal to go forward. That's where all of a sudden your habits are taking control. So you're really creating a pathway to create habits toward the direction that you're wishing to go. But that first initial start, it's so worth it, because especially if you're someone like myself, and I'm sure many of you can relate, if you're a procrastinator, it doesn't feel good. You beat yourself up about it thinking, well, didn't do it again today. That's not very awesome. But when you have the one thinking, finally, it may just be one tiny little nugget I took on, but I finally did something. If it's something that you're meant to do, it resonates in your gut. And that is the best. It's the best.
Yeah. And when you said about the like procrastination, then you just feel shitty about it. I'm like, that's the opposite of momentum. Is when you're focusing on like, oh, I wish it wasn't so shitty. I wish I wasn't such a shit for this shit. And you're like, yeah, now I want to get up and chase my dreams.
Yeah. Good pep talk.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, this is nice. And yeah, I think it's just that it's that you just got to get started, and you have to let go of this. I'm not going to start until I'm I'm not going to start
Till I'm there.
Till I'm at least at the halfway line.
But we're all guilty of it. That's why it's funny.
Absolutely. When you break it down, it seems so ridiculous, but like everyone's like, oh, I'll start, but I've got this and this and this. And I feel like I couldn't because of this, this, and this. No one's like, well, that's lunacy. Everyone's like, no, understandable. Yeah, you should wait. Like that's more what the consensus is because we're all so used to it. We're all so used to it. I was so used to it. And like I said, I achieved so many of my goals, but I achieved them because the only reason when I really think about it, why I achieved so many of my goals in life was because I've been so stubborn about listening to intuition. And I will like leap off a cliff if my gut's like, look, you'll land. I promise you'll land softly. Okie dokie. And I do end up landing softly, but I take huge leaps, but it's because I'm so stubborn about listening to my like guttural feelings. But if it wasn't for that, oh God, I wouldn't have done anything.
Right. And I mean, a way deeper conversation, but honestly, we get this notion that time is going to be endless. The time is now. We have promises of nothing. So why wouldn't we just do it now? Not to doom and gloom us, but it is true. I live my life kind of not in a negative way, but knowing that notion daily is what propels me to just grab life as best I can. I think that this leads us to our motivation maintenance because we've talked about the what and we've talked about the how, but let's really break down the how because we want to leave you guys with a way that you can literally start today because all we've talked about is starting today. So what have you got for us, Laurie?
Yeah.
Like, well, that's all well and fine, but they didn't tell me how to start, so I'm not going to start. No, we're not letting you leave with that excuse.
My motivation maintenance would be to utilize momentum that you already got rocking. So look at somewhere in your life. So say you wake up every morning and you make your bed and that's your habit. You find something that's already working for you, where there's already momentum, somewhere where there's a habitual behavior, and then choose something to add on to it. And why I say that is because your energy's already up. It's already easy. And so, and ask yourself too, when did you create that? Because you didn't just come out of the womb making your bed or going to exercise or whatever it is. At some point you had to start somewhere very simple and you had to build and you had to create a momentum around it. So also reference that to be like, I've done this before. I can do this again. And when you're creating the new little momentum of habit, wherever you want, start small, start simple, be very aware that you're doing it. Like very aware that like, I'm doing this. And when you add a little bit more onto that, acknowledge that like I'm pushing myself a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further, because you're going to again carry that momentum into somewhere else where something else becomes hard. And you're like, no, I've done this before. I've done this before. I can do this again, and keep building off what's already working in your day to build your momentum and work with what you got already.
So mine, everybody, I'm going to give you a whole week to do this one. In this week, I want you to promise yourself that you're going to carve out 1 hour of your week, just 1 hour, to make space for that someday thing that you've been telling yourself, yeah, I'll get to that. Maybe someday. And literally just dedicate 1 hour. It could be researching your path, a goal setting session. 1 hour. That's an attainable chunk, I think, for any of us. So let's dedicate 1 hour this week to something that goes toward a goal that we have put off from pursuing. Maybe I'll make 1 hour of TikTok content. I don't know.
Send it to my ass. I'll enjoy. So, Krissy, what is your little tidbit, quote, takeaway for the folks at home or in their car or walking around or wherever you're listening?
So I was torn because there were so many good ones, but I don't know how to pronounce the name correctly. Leora, I believe, which is a beautiful name. If it's Leora Alderson had this one. Inaction and inertia are anti-life. It's against what we're here to do, grow. We are here to grow.
Oh, I like that one.
Right.
That's
what is
a good
yours,
one.
Laurie?
Mine is by Gil Pacina. Momentum begets momentum, and the best way to start is to start.
Well, that just sums up your motivation.
It's like a WWE.
You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your host, Krissy Van, and me, Laurie Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motovation Podcast and visit our website at themotovation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.